familiarized with AV technology. Thank you everyone for coming. Sorry about the time mishap. I'll try and make it worth all of your time, but thank you. I especially know that the students, especially toward the end of the semester, things are starting to get a little crazy, so I appreciate the interest. And thank you, Adi and Nick and the organizers for inviting me. My understanding is that there have been several of these speaker series already, but primarily they've been speakers coming in and talking about what is data science. Is that ringing bells? Is that correct? Okay. This is going to be a little bit different. Since we work with Quicken Loans, it's a little bit more on the applied side, if you will, in the sense of this is what we do, it's a job, it really does exist, and people do it for a living, and it has a strong impact on people. So that'll be more or less the first 2/3, and then I wanted to reserve the last piece for how I got into data science. I'm still fairly recently out of grad school, but I know that a lot of you guys are starting to look into what comes next, and so I thought it would be beneficial to cover some of that stuff. All right, so Quicken Loans, who we are. The way that we kind of brand ourselves when we're talking to people is that we're a tech company that happens to do mortgages. This is a common phrase that gets tossed around all the time. But really what we mean by that is that the business does mortgages, but what our real passion is in the technology that goes around actually working with the clients to help in this fashion. So a couple of things to kind of reinforce that idea is that we are actually the #1 online lender. So that would be if you go searching around the internet and try and get a mortgage by interacting through that as opposed to calling people or going into a bank, we're the largest. We have also won the #1 place to work in IT from Computer World magazine 4 years and running, which is a pretty major accomplishment considering some of the heavy hitters out on the West Coast. Another way in which we actively strive to maintain a positive IT environment is, it's a pretty common thing in large tech companies. We call it bullet time, but the idea is that every week you take a couple of hours and you work on something which you have a passion for, either building something new or learning to continually build on your own skills. So we take every Monday afternoon to do that, and we are actually very aggressive about protecting that time. I've heard from the CIO directly that if somebody is scheduling meetings over bullet time, we should feel free to reject them and say, don't schedule meetings during this time so that we can focus on the types of things that we're interested in. So Quicken Loans is the flagship company. We have many, many different startups and even a couple of larger sized companies and the entire family of companies as well. These range from things like Rocket Fiber, which is a fiber optic internet company, to things like StockX, which is a stock exchange for things, so like tennis shoes. And many of these startups actually grew out of bullet time. Somebody had an idea and they wanted to run with it, and it grew and it snowballed, and eventually they went to Dan Gilbert and said, hey, I want to do this as a company, and they got funding and spun it off into their own company and are now doing that full time. So it is very much supported, and some of the really good ideas come out of bullet time. Most people, at least probably here, know that we are headquartered in downtown Detroit. I looked it up. We moved down there about 10 years ago and really have not looked back. We have a ton of money invested in the city, and we own apparently 95 plus properties. The joke being on the plus because it seems to change every week. Dan Gilbert is constantly buying new buildings, flipping them, getting other businesses to come downtown, and I think there was a major automotive industry actually that decided to move downtown. I think it was announced yesterday. So I mean, there's really a lot of revitalization downtown. If you haven't been down there in a couple of years and you remember it as being kind of slingshod and not very nice, I strongly advise going down there sometime. There are tours that really showcase all of the nice things that are going on, and they're really wonderful things, and it's it's nice to be a part of that. In addition to the straight business, economic interest, there's also a lot of volunteering. Quicken Loans employees are strongly encouraged to volunteer. Last year we had over 100,000 volunteer hours, which is a staggering number. I love it personally. The company, in total, we have 15,000 employees, but about 12,000 downtown Detroit. So use whatever math you want to on that. How the volunteer hours work is every employee is given, I think, 8 hours of volunteer time for non-Quicken sponsored events. And then if it is a Quicken sponsored volunteer event, then they can just go ahead and take it. So teams, entire teams of people will go and work and help, go to schools and do some work there. So it's a really wonderful way to give back to the city, which is hosting our company down there. Alright, so our team, specifically the data science team, is about 40 strong right now, and we are still growing. We focus on all areas of the business, which is an intentional oxymoron. By this I mean that we have different team members are focusing on different areas of the business. So you'll have one team which is focusing on, for example, marketing, and another team which is focusing on servicing, things like that. But the 40-member team, collectively, we do focus on all the different areas of the business, so we get to work on projects that hit just about everything. We're a combination of data scientists, engineers, business analysts. Everyone has a different part to play, and it's really a good group. One thing which I really like to stress when I'm thinking about data science is diversity of ideas. And this really, I think we have a nicely balanced team, which is continuing to grow in that regard. So there's a lot of different opportunities, pretty much regardless of your background. All right, so kind of now switching to the what of Quicken Loans. We do mortgages as our business, as I mentioned. We're all students, so probably Richard is the only one here who actually owns a house. I know I don't. I've never been through the mortgage process. And in college, I knew absolutely nothing about it, so I want to give a little bit of background so that we don't lose anyone. A mortgage, at its core, basically is just a loan to own property. So if you're thinking in terms of economics, of your compound interest and things like that, that all applies in a normal sense. The way that it works is there's a couple different organizations which will finance loans. The big ones are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And then for FHA, there's also Ginnie Mae. But all of these organizations are owned by the government. So what happens is you go to a bank or Quicken Loans in order to apply for a mortgage. And then once you're approved for that mortgage, that mortgage is sold to one of these organizations, and then so they start collecting all the interest, but they're also the ones providing the funding. And what they do with all that accrued interest money is they reinvest that back in mortgages, and that's how they keep the interest rates low. But because almost everything is through the government, they also set the interest rates. So pretty much anywhere that you go, you're going to get about the same interest rates. There might be minor fluctuations, especially depending on products, because companies do have different products. But for the most part, it's about the same. So how Quicken Loans likes to distinguish themselves in an environment which is inherently flat is by focusing on the service. So really working with the client, making things easy, trying to help them out. The reason for this being that houses are expensive. They're a little daunting to think about. For most people, they're the most expensive purchase they will ever make by kind of a wide margin. So we like to try and help people through that. And part of that's on the communication, part of that is also on the technology side. We do like to use modern technology, which doesn't sound that interesting until you realize that the mortgage industry is horribly backwards in terms of its technology. For example, I remember a year ago, Wells Fargo was super excited because they had just launched e-sign for their documents, which is not great. Most companies are doing that 5 or 10 or 15 years well before that. So we like to actually try and focus on that. As I mentioned before, we're a technology company that does mortgages, and we are the largest online lender, so that's part of our bread and butter. And we have gotten the recognition for this. There's an organization known as J.D. Power, which goes out and surveys customers of different companies based on the service. And for mortgage origination, we've actually won it now 7 years in a row. This was announced about 20 days ago, actually. And it's at the point where when I was talking with PR, they didn't have a good image of this, so I had to use the announcement emails image that included the new one. We also have 3 servicing awards in a row, and we've been eligible for that award 3 times. So we're batting 1,000 on that right now. And I mean, that's really just, it's demonstrative of the fact that we focus so heavily on the client side. All right, so in terms of mortgages, there's really 2 different ways that you might think about going to get a mortgage. The first one is the common one that everybody thinks about. Hey, I want to purchase a home. You go and you get a mortgage so that you can buy that home, and this is called the purchase scenario. The other scenario, which people don't think about until a little bit later when they have to actually start doing some of these things, is refinance, which is taking your current mortgage and restructuring it. So the way that would work is you take a loan to pay off the first loan, still backed against the house. The reason that you might do that, well, there's a couple different reasons. I like to think of it in terms of 3 large goals, really, and we think about it as a company in this way as well. You might take cash out, which is to say, hey, I need some cash now. I want to increase my loan amount so that I can have that money now. For example, to pay off student loans or to renovate your kitchen or any number of different things. You might also want to lower your payment. It's too much, you lost your job, you have to cut back, something like that over a longer period of time. And then there's shortening your term. That would be, hey, I just got this great raise, I want to pay this off faster because it's going to save more money in the long run because of the interest. If you pay it off faster, there's less time for interest to accrue, so you end up paying less in the long run. So if you want to think about them, they're kind of short-term, medium-term, and long-term financial goals that you might have in mind when you go to refinance your house. The way that the mortgage process works is you go in, you apply for the mortgage, which usually involves talking to a banker, giving them some information about how much money you make, how much money you have in the bank, things like that. They'll pull your credit, and they'll come back and say, here's the kind of mortgage conditions that I think you might have, and you can work with them to change them up a little bit or things like that based on what you're eligible for. At that point, if you like what you're seeing, you can say, yes, let's go ahead and do it. That piece usually takes place within the first couple of days of the process. Then you move into what we call operations, which is now that you're moving with this and you've said you make all this, you have to prove it. So you get all the documentation saying, yes, I make this much, yes, I have this much money, this is my house, I own the deed, all kinds of different information. This, as an industry standard, usually takes about 60 days. Quicken Loans is a little bit faster. I think our average is around 35 days right now. Okay, so it's just a little bit faster. Still much, much longer than actually applying for the loan. And then finally, once everything's set, you sign it, you get the money, and start to pay off the loan, which is the closing and then moving into the servicing, which is the 30 years or however long you're actually paying off the loan. So as you're moving down, I can't see that, so as you're moving down on the screen, it's taking longer and longer periods of time, with the exception of closing, which is signing a sheet of paper after reading a nice stack of papers. So us being Quicken Loans, we said this isn't fast enough, we want to do something better. So we decided to go out and do something else. And there's very low sound. That's all right. Let's cancel that before it runs. So yeah, we created this thing that launched about a year ago now, actually, which is mind-blowing to me. It feels much shorter than that, called Rocket Mortgage. The idea behind Rocket Mortgage is we're going to remove the banker from the equation. We want people to go online in order to do everything up to the initial approval process. So the idea is we want to empower the client to lead themselves in their own adventure, which again is a little bit of a daunting task for most people, so we have to be a little careful in terms of how we actually build this system and communicate and work with the client. Especially because they're not working with the banker, they might be a little wary. However, a lot of these things, we did actually make the system a little better. You can now automatically import a lot of your information just right up front. For example, your income and assets. Assets is like how much money you have in the bank and other properties, things like that. You also always have the option of chatting with the banker, or at any point in time, you can drop offline and actually call a banker. But the hope is to keep you entirely online, and it is a much, much faster process as well. That 2 days can now get, I've seen the average is somewhere around 15 minutes, I think, to make it through the initial process for Rocket Mortgage. It's very, very fast. So what it does, it gathers your information, sorts through your initial eligibility, so saying you might be eligible for this, you might be eligible for that, not this third thing over here, so figuring out all that stuff. And then it presents everything to you in a list so that you can dig through it and say, this is exactly the one that I want. And if you go ahead and click on that, it'll go through that initial approval process as well and move you right onto operations. That's our happy path, so when everything goes well. This is really, really cool from a data science perspective. We can build an automated system which has all kinds of decisions in it. And so we have all kinds of project opportunities now. For example, the client has this list of products and different loan terms that they might be eligible for. So how do we show them to a client? We can't just do a brain dump and say, here's your full list. There's way too much information. That's going to scare the client. We don't want to do that. So what we do is, even right now, there's these little slider bars. So it gives you one initial one, and then you can play with it as you see fit. But what should we present for that one? That becomes a big question. We do have a lot of information about the client, but we don't know everything. And this is normally a job that the bankers are doing. So this is something that needs some automated decision support. The idea... Oh.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Let's do it now. Okay, so pizza has arrived.